Good afternoon. I'm Beth Copeland with Georgia Christian Business Network. Hold on one second. Okay, there we go. Okay, so here we go. Again, I'm Beth Copeland with Georgia Christian Business Network, and we are putting God back in business. Today is Wednesday, and it's Wellness Wednesday. And do we have a treat for you? Listen, this is the second opportunity for this month, for the month of September, that we get to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and it is love. And I'm so excited, Pamela, for how God, I continually say this over and over again. And although Jessica's absent today, and we're keeping her in our prayers for her health and for her healing, but Christine's here with me, and I'm sure she'll definitely agree. The topics that we are privileged to discuss on Wellness Wednesday that God is bringing through you have just been wonderful and timely, to say the minimum. Yeah. And so this opportunity, thank you for that. So we're talking about the path of love, and I'm going to pass the baton over to you in just a second, but I want to remind the people prior to doing so that this is still the year of the double. From January 1, 2023 to December 31st, 11:59, it is still the year of the double. And God so chooses, it could be the year of the double next year as well. I don't know what that's going to look like. But for right now, we're focused on what God has given us for our theme, for our focus for this year. And I mentioned that too, to go to here and say that when God unfolded and gave the download for the acronym for double, love is a part of that. The L in the double is loving limitlessly. And so, Pamela, I'm going to pass over to you so you can tell the people, recap, whatever, introduce yourself at the end, and then pass it over to Christine as well. Thank you, Bianca, for supporting us today. For those that may have joined us over on the Facebook side of the house, we appreciate your support.
Hey, Christine, you want to introduce yourself, and then I'll introduce myself and lead into the recap?
Sounds great. I'm Christine Oswald. I'm a professional Christian life coach. I have my master's degree in marriage and family therapy and specializations in Christian sex therapy and Christian spiritual formation and direction. I am trained at the Professional Christian Coach Institute and love to walk alongside God and others to help them live in alignment with their true self in the Lord.
Praise God. I'm Pamela Bridgman Bartell, and I am licensed clinical social worker. I also hold credentials as a certified master addictions counselor and a certified clinical trauma professional. I'm an ordained minister and a United States Air Force veteran. I own a healing journey counseling and consultation here in Northwest Georgia, where I provide support for individuals challenged with mood disorders, anxiety disorders, trauma, substance use disorders, and relationship issues. I've been providing compassionate care since 1976. And Beth is a
executive coach, leadership development team developer. I love training, and I love and enjoy, and I have embraced my calling for leadership development. And so I'm a catalyst basically to help people win in business and in life. I pulled away from some of the one-to-one coaching, preferably doing mass coaching. And so that's who I am and what I do, in addition to leading Georgia Christian Business Network, God's People Ministry, and the Atlanta Director for the National Association of Christian Women Entrepreneurs.
And doing an excellent job. And I just kind of feel led to put in a plug. If you have not joined GCBN as a member or as a sponsor, I recommend that you go out to the webpage gcbnetwork.org.
.com,
GCBnetwork.com, and see the options there. And you don't have to live in in Georgia. In fact, I'm trying to get Beth to call it global since that network
I
because
really believe that's common. I really do. It's me. It's me.
because of just the incredible work that Beth is and GCBN that God is using Beth to do. You know, Beth is one of the most humble women I know, so she is by no means puffing herself up. But I do want you to know that God is using her to really, that executive coaching thing that he has anointed her to do, it really shows up through the work she does with GCBN. And so please join us as a part of it.
I appreciate you so much, Pamela. Thank you. And she's been a sponsor for, I don't know, since I guess you joined us. You know, I
The
know
second year, I wasn't a
8
sponsor
years.
the first year. I
The
was
first year. Okay.
the second year I became a sponsor. So
oh wow. So we
we
appreciate that. And I will add that Christine Oswald and Rich are corporate sponsors as well as Jessica. So I just appreciate that support. And they're serious about their sponsorship and a passion that they dedicate their time to this hour. And it's not just this hour that you see, it's a lot of preparation going into bringing a podcast on this powerfully. And even as we transition, you may say, well, I came to hear you talk about the path of love. Well, you're hearing it right now, because this is what the outcome of the path of love brings is uniquely unified opportunities.
That collaboration. So we're talking about the path of love this month, and last month we defined. So what is love, and or rather, why is it that we should love? And we talked about the fact that we love because God first loved us. We love because the scripture admonishes us that hereby will the world and others know that we are his, because we have love one for another. We love because Jesus Christ, right, died on the cross. And because of that, his love is shed abroad in our hearts. And so that's why we love. And today we're going to talk about the attributes of love. You'll notice that next week we're going to talk about the character of love. There's only a nuanced difference between the two. That nuanced difference is enough that it behooves us to talk about them separately. So today we're going to talk about the attributes. And an attribute is simply the distinguishing trait or quality or worth of something. So this is interesting. When he was asked what the greatest commandment is, Jesus responded in Mark 12:30-31, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, which is your heart, with all your mind, which is your thought and understanding, and with all your strength. The second is like it. You will love unselfishly your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. And this means that love is a trademark of all of us as Christ followers. In other words, love is not an option, right? Therefore, we need to understand these. And so before I throw it to the panel, according to a footnote in the Bible Gateway application, the key to understanding verse 31 that I just read about love is that to know that love is the Greek word agape, and it is not just a matter of emotion, or rather it is a matter of doing things for the benefit of the other person. Did you hear what I said? It's not emotion. It's a matter of doing it for the benefit of someone outside of ourselves. That is having an unselfish concern for another and a willingness to not just do the best, but actually seek out what is the best for the other person. And as a therapist, and I am sure that Christine will agree with me on this, one of the things we say is you're not to assume what's the best for the other person. You have actually got to get to know that person and to understand, what is going on in their heart before you can actually love. When we, and Beth, you probably do the same thing too, and Christine, but when I'm working with couples, and let's say I have them looking at the 5 love languages. Well, my love language may not be your love language. However, because I love you, I am going to seek a way to speak to you in the way that you receive love. So that's what it is. So the question to you, Beth and Christine, is this. Before we take a closer look at any specific attributes, I want you to comment on the fact that love is not an option for us as Christ followers. Come in. And I know, because it's your superpower, Beth, you can speak to this. Love is not an option.
I want to defer, if you're okay, to Christine.
Christine
because,
first, okay.
I want to, let me, because I'm ready to go about
So
that.
Christine,
But I want to pull back a little bit.
Share with us why it is that love is not an option for us.
Yeah, I'm going to just read from 1 John 4, if that's all right, for a minute. Starting in verse 7, dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. And then later on, God is love, and this is verse 16. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in them, in him, in them, depending on. And this is how love is made complete among us, so that we will have confidence on the day of judgment. In this world, we are like Jesus. We love because he first loved us. So if we are his and he is in us, then love is our new nature. If we are not loving, we are not living in accordance with our new nature. And fortunately, it is agape love, which is a choice. And, and it says the first commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart. So those are emotions, right? With all your soul, that's your whole self, spirit included. With all your mind, that's your thoughts, your understanding, your wills, your cognition. And with your body, that's all your strength. And so to have him in us and us in him, that's that wonderful mystical part that Ephesians talks about so much, right? Is that he is love. And sometimes that's forgiving 70 times 7, because we have to often work through pain, hurt, justified sin those have done to us to get to love. Sometimes we have to reach out to others to help us get to a place where we can think clearly. That's the mind part, right? Think clearly through, how can I do this so it is in the other person's best interest? I mean, there's not one therapist I know who is not at some point in their life triggered by the couple that comes into their office and sits down. They're too much like mom and dad. They're too much like the parent that abandoned you. They have a similar perfume to somebody that hurt you, or a similar cologne to an ex-boyfriend. We're all going to get triggered, right? So how do we agape for their own good love? Well, we have to work through our triggers. We got to work through our stuff. We do this all the time with friends and family. And when someone hurts you in a way that reminds you of a huge hurt that tasted kind of similar back in the day, right? So you got to work through all of that triggers so that we can now think through what is in their best interest here. What's in their best interest is that I'm not, I mean, we're going to get there, I think, with the marriage part, but, all the Gottman 4 horsemen, but, how do we love? Why are we commanded to? Oh, because it's so hard. And there's nothing else that gets us to get on our knees than when the Lord says, love your enemy, turn the other cheek, get up at 2 a.m. for the 7th, 8th year in a row because you had so many babies and you're absolutely exhausted, and but you're going to love them and you're going to show that you're going to be there because God's always there. And that's how we model it. I mean, love is hard. It's beautiful, but it's hard.
I was sharing with
It's
you guys last week. I'll get to that. I just want about when God, the vision I had, and God said, teach my people love. And I was only 21 years old. And I thought that was, oh, wow, teach my people love. This is a great calling. But as Christine just pointed out, what I didn't realize at 21, that I certainly know now at 67, that you have to experience some pretty unlovely things to demonstrate that you really know how to walk in what is best for the other person. Yeah.
what joy, what joy, what joy, what joy. You know, I'm sitting here. I had an opportunity to spend some time with Toby Carvana
yeah.
and her Steal Back Your Joy. I don't know if you have a copy of this, but I want to encourage you to get your hands on it. You may say, Beth, y'all are talking about love, the fruit of the spirit, love. But, you know, it's love, joy. Joy
Yeah.
follows love. And I just want to, and I said, God, I'm going to send a shout out to Toby this morning because that's what God showed me. Joy follows love. And so, Christine, I'm so glad I said that to defer to her first, because I was going to say about the reason, the urgency is that it's a commandment.
Right.
You read it, you know, I know 1 Corinthians 13 is beautiful, but back it up. You know, Paul said it so beautifully there, but this is the commandment. This is a commandment that you should love one another. It's not an option. It's not an option. And then when Christine went on to expand that out from where Pamela kicked us off, is to say, you know, to help us to understand that loving is going to require more of us. And when you declare and decree, or decree and declare, whichever way you want to say it, love to be your superpower, as God has shown that to me recently. Oh, are you going to be challenged like she said? You know, and so it's not for the meek, and it's most definitely not for the weak. And you have to know the difference in those two. We won't have time today, but it's an opportunity to get promoted to joy. But the love has to be foundational, you know, in place, set. And the love that you are exemplifying, that is exuding from you, is not love from Beth Copeland. Because, girl, I can handle some stuff. There's a side to girl who.
And that's why it is God's love in us. It's the love that has been shed brought in our hearts that allows us to do this. Otherwise, there's no way that you can love in your own strength.
No. And the piece that I was going to share with you all, this is why I deferred to hear Jessica, and it's so timely, that my next book after the other two that I've already got, Get Off the Bus, that I haven't written, and the other one before that. Yeah, the next one is going to be Love Your Enemy. Really, God? Why? And because there's such power in love, and that comes from love, and because God is love. And we were called to imitate him. And when I continually say and try to get my head around, my heart around, while I was yet a sinner, Christ died for me. That's pretty bizarre. Even though he knew I was a sinner, he was willing to sacrifice his love for me. So that he was so selfless that he died for me. And I'm sitting here having problems about somebody pulling out in front of me.
See. Hey, I laid on my horn the day before yesterday, although that was pretty close call. They turned right.
But I'm not a road rage person, but I got.
I wasn't a road rage. They just
but I got other stuff. Yeah, I got my other stuff.
And it's not just, he said, you love each other so that the world would know that you're mine. But there's another piece. It's the love your neighbor. who may or may not be a Christ follower. So why is it not an option for us to not just love other Christ followers, but we've also got to love that person in the workplace that may not be a believer, that neighbor that may not be a Christ follower? Speak to that. Why is that also not an option?
I'm following you, Christine.
Oh, I can see it. Jesus said, I think, how, if you're kind to those who are kind to you, what's the benefit in that, right? So that, love your enemies, love those who persecute you, love those who speak ill and slander you. And it really sounds backwards in a lot of ways, right? Because where's the justice? Where's the retribution? Where's the truth? And I think that's where, some of us, I think, just temperamentally are wired more towards mercy, and some of us are wired more towards justice. And, but we're all called to love, right? And so, and it is nuanced. Love isn't always soft. Sometimes it's tough. Love isn't always, just come run over me. Actually, I don't think that's love at all, being a doormat or being codependent, right? It is knowing what is grace and truth and being able to, as Mark Yarhouse would say, fly with balanced wings. And so loving your neighbor may not mean, that you don't have a talk with them or build a fence with a gate, but what is our attitude? Are we Christ to them? Are we reflecting him as well as we can? And are we in process of reflecting him more as he continues to transform and sanctify us? I think that, all of us, and if people watching haven't had that chance yet, it'll come. All of us have at least one, but several people in our world that are those 70 times 7 people that they've sinned against us over and over and over again. And because of the nature of our relationship, whether we work with them or whether they're in our families or whatever, they're not people that can go away. And we can't go away from them. And so in that is the crucible of our purification. Where is the justice? Where's the retribution? Who can I trust to take care of that? Where's the love come from? What is it? Some of us who tend to be wired towards more mercy, we have to learn boundaries. Other people who are wired more towards moving away or moving against, they have to learn how to stay engaged in vulnerable yet strong ways. And how do we kind of continue to allow us to become more of who Christ has us to be in those relationships? And if it's not commanded, none of us would want to do this work.
Right. It's that balance, and I hope I don't get out of order. But if Beth was going to follow what you're about to say, Christine, but I want to just put here in the middle of this that we love our neighbors and those that may not be Christ followers and continue to offend, because God drew us with loving kindness. And as his hands extended, right, as his presence in the earth realm, we have to love and be that conduit of him drawing them loving kindness.
This is such a powerful topic. And some people call it the soft skills. And in the workplace, I used to hire, even before I was an HR manager for a GE Capital business, I used to hire and play more to the soft skills because I could teach. I was in collections, credit and collections. I could teach the technical piece of it. But you got to have the right heart, the right perspective, and the right level of humility. What I want to say in alignment with what you ladies have said, how Christine chimed in and then back to you and back to here, is this is my piece. And we've talked about it, but I just want to read this whole passage. It's just several, maybe about 4 scriptures here, or maybe 5. And it's still what we've talked about in Matthew 5:44. But I say to you, love, wait, 43. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who despitefully use you and persecute you. I'm going to say that one again. But I say to you, love your enemies. Pamela's taught us about love being an action, a verb that requires action, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
And so that requires action, but bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. And 45 says that you may be, this is where I want to land, so that, make it personal, so that I may be a son of my Father in the house, in heaven. But it says scripturally that you may be sons of your Father in heaven, for he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the
And the
unjust.
unjust.
But the second part to that I think ties in right now, for if you, this is an answer direct to your question, for if you if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do you not even the tax collectors do the same? And then it goes on to say, and if you greet your brethren only, what do you more than others? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? Therefore, you shall be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. Now, I don't know, and I'd have to do a study again, but I'm a little rusty right now, but I want to venture to say that is one of the only or few opportunities in scriptural that it references being perfect, even as the Father is perfect. Now, I used to know that factually, but you do the research and you bring it back to me.
And
But
to
the
make
thing
sense
that
of that word perfect, we do need to kind of pull it out of the Western thinking and put it into the Eastern thinking. Otherwise, we get in this performance thing. So just
Right.
talk
Right.
to that.
And
Talk
we
to that.
and we actually, and she will in a moment, and we're actually doing
Okay.
a whole thing next month on perfectionism. And so,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
But go ahead, proceed.
There you go.
Yeah, in this context, it's shalom. It's kind of like this whole well-being, completion, maturity. So when we read that, be perfect, a lot of times it's been historically through the Christian faith. You can, kind of go back Puritans and all that, where it's been, kind of this striving and this outward expression of how to judge each other. But it's not. It's actually this formation idea of be perfect as he's imperfect, that there's a ripening, a completion, a maturity, a wholeness making is kind of what that word means.
And we're gonna
Okay.
spend the whole month next month talking about that.
Because we can be perfected in a thing. It's not, some people say nobody can be perfect. Well, Pamela, get to that next month, right? But I'm glad you helped that much. Because the thing that I want to say is, and this is my point out of all of that reading. Love is one of the most powerful things that you can do to honor God
Yes,
and to walk in leadership.
absolutely.
I know how much, I'm saying this, I can tell how much you love God by how much you love God's people. You can tell how much I love God by how much I love God's people. It's evidence. You can't hide this stuff. If you're blessing those that curse you, I mean, the challenge to grow my leadership, and I still have a ways to go, guys. But the challenge that I put before Beth Copeland that holds me accountable is, can you pray for them? What I found out, you can't pray for people and talk about them at the same time.
Absolutely.
You can't get on your knees and intercede for someone and try to hate them. You just can't do it. It just doesn't work. I've tried it. Because you can't
Absolutely.
fool God and you confuse yourself.
So let's look at, I don't think we're going to get to all the attributes today, but so let me tell you what the three are that I was planning for us to look at: patience, serenity, and kindness. Patience is the capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset. It is essential to distinguish patience from indifference or stonewalling. Patience bears with an offense, but indifference ignores it altogether. When an offense takes place that is harmful or destructive to oneself or others, it must not be entirely overlooked. And so the question to you, Christine and Beth, how is indifference or stonewalling destructive to relationships? And conversely, how does patience build up trust? And I was going to have Jessica talk about friendship, and you and Beth talk about how important patience is in the marriage relationship and in relationship with children.
I'll take friendship and you go for that, Christine, if you'd like.
Okay. So first, I kind of want to define stonewalling, if that's okay, because I know
Yeah,
it's
please.
kind of in public, but not everybody. So it's kind of become a popular term because of the Gottman Institute, John and Julie Gottman, who've done decades of research on successful and marriages and how to make them successful. And they talk about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse that are problematic in marriages, right? So it's criticism, contempt, defense, and stonewalling. And they, could watch a couple interact over a few interactions and predict with 91% accuracy or 85 to 91% accuracy of whether or not they divorce or not, based on the level of contempt, which is, cynicism, sarcasm, eye rolling, disgust, disdain. But one of the 4 horsemen is stonewalling. And this is this kind of like, I'm over it, I'm done. This idea of a persistent refusal to communicate, ignoring one another. And stereotypically does kind of follow the majority in a relationship is that men tend to stonewall more than women. But it is this idea of just kind of, I'm done. And so indifference that we were talking about here would be just kind of like, I don't care about you anymore, right? So it kind of goes with some contempt-ish behaviors as well. Criticism and defensiveness, those are still pretty engaged, right? You did this. Well, no, I didn't. You're still toward each other, even if it's combative toward each other. While indifference and stonewalling is, you're not worth the time. I don't care anymore. And I'm out of there. So I just wanted to make sure people kind of knew what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that people don't need a timeout. And that's the kind of the cure for stonewalling, when the heart rate gets over, about 100 beats a minute, most men just can't stay engaged. That's a physiological fact. So taking a break, the difference between hurtful stonewalling is that when you intentionally do it, you say, okay, well, we're going to pick this conversation up again, tonight at 6 or, tomorrow after
And I'm
work.
glad you mentioned, because when I talk about conflict resolution, when you say I need a break, got to come back to it. And what I tell the couples that I work with is, if you say you're coming back to it at 6 p.m., don't come back to it at 6:15, because that's still broken trust. Yeah. Come back to it at 6 o'clock p.m.
Yeah, and so patience, or long suffering, as it would be in some of, King James, is, kind of this balance, accept one another as God in Christ accepted you. There are some things where love covers a multitude of sins, right? And we don't put up with sin, but what it means is we're not bailing. And stonewalling is an emotional bailing out on somebody. Love withdrawal. And research shows that love withdrawal to silent treatment is just as damaging as other forms of abuse. So the idea in a relationship—
Say that again. Say that last line again.
Love withdrawal has been shown to be just as damaging to a relationship as other forms of abuse.
Forms of abuse.
Because love withdrawal is a shame thing, right? You're not worth even talking to anymore. Can you imagine the message that sends to children and spouses? So patience isn't putting up with sin. I think that's what Pamela has in her notes. It's when it's harmful or destructive, it's not to be overlooked. But what it is patience is, I'm going to choose to stay and suffer a long time in this relationship and put the boundaries in place and love you and love me, and hopefully you love me, where we are going to find that line between what we can accept under biblical authority and what needs to change. And we're going to stick with each other and get that change together. Stonewalling might be this, okay, I need to step away for a while, but I love you enough to say I'm going to come back to you, right? In time. But indifference is you're not even worth the time of day anymore. So that is very destructive, because that's aligning with the enemy and what he says over us, as opposed to aligning with the Lord. That reconciliation is important. Relationship is worth it. And even if it hurts, there's the joy and the love.
I love it. I love
And
it.
the choice of the word joy, because joy is about that contentment. It's that same long suffering. Whereas you're not making me happy. Well, God really doesn't require us to make one another happy. It's more about that joy and contentment in being in this committed leave to cleave relationship. And the same thing with our children.
I like the way you broke down stonewalling, and it's just as applicable in a marriage, because that's a relationship as well, because honestly, I love, and we don't have time to talk about this, but I love how back in the Old Testament with Sarah and Abraham, he recognized, or had to recognize, that she is his sister. And in a marriage, sometimes that's the only thing I'll say about that. You have to look at your spouse as your sister or brother in Christ, because we have a tendency in marriage to forget that in addition to my spouse, this is my brother, in Christ. But we'll go out the door and engage another brother or another sister on a different level, and the expectations are minimized, whereas they are upped when you're dealing with a spouse. So that's the only thing. I know I'm not speaking about spouse, I'm speaking about relationships, but friendship. And this is the thing that I think in relationships, is even whether female to female or male to male, or mix that up. Okay. The deal is this. First, when there's a challenge, we have to make certain that we recognize that there's an elephant in the room. That I was talking to my grandbaby, I'm here with them, for some reasons this week and for a while. But any rate, had the opportunity and the pleasure of giving mommy and daddy some alone time and to put her to bed last night. So we had a story time, or we could have grandma make one up, or the opportunity for her to choose a book. So she chose the thickest book I think she could find, but it was a Bible story. So I had something for her too, because we weren't going to read every Bible story in that book. But you know what she chose is David and Goliath. And she knew the story already. I was like, oh my goodness, this child knows every story I read, she knew, but I was the glamour moment there. But I want to stick to David and Goliath, and from a 3-year-old. She said to me, and this is what we have to learn in relationships, that David defeated, number one, I'm thinking, what you know about defeated? 3, the giant. And and I'm going to get me a sling, and I'm going to get some stones. And I'm gonna, if a giant comes in here, Grandma, I'm gonna sling it, I'm gonna knock him out. Now, when I got myself back to composure in my head, because my face wasn't saying what was going on in my head, because I'm in shock, okay? But the opportunity is this, that I'm talking about with friendships, that what we often do is we don't face that giant and get our slingshot and put it in there. And so I broke it down for her, like I'm about to tell you right now, that giants are not just coming for you in the form of people. Sometimes there are circumstances, situations, and I broke it down to her level. Okay, for things that might relate to her. But for us today, what God is wanting me to say is that we have to understand that we have to confront whatever it is. When the relationship in the beginning, and those of you that have a spirit of discernment, and if you don't, you know when something's not right in a relationship. If you would just speak to it. And remember, Proverbs 17:17 says that a friend loveth at all times. But there are times when there's shifts in relationships, and you have to read in Paul and how you have to refrain from and separate from time to time. And sometimes God's growing you in relationships that outside of that relationship, there's a shift happening. And what I want to say is that's okay. And sometimes it's lopsided in relationships. And the individual isn't contributing to the relationship, and God is trying to bring you forward in the relationship. Allow God to do the adjustment, but it's okay for you to get off the bus. It is really okay, especially if you're not being valued, because we talk about it a lot at GGG sometimes. It's the value for me. And God wants to make sure that we're not unequally yoked. And sometimes you get stifled in a relationship.
Yeah,
that
we're
it
segueing
interferes
into the unequally yoked.
Okay, gotcha. That it interferes with our spiritual growth. I was in a relationship with a friend, and honestly, I never cared to have to title something BFF. I've since learned my BFF I've lived with for 42 years, and that's it for me. But y'all do what you need to do, okay? With labeling somebody, if you're married, as a BFF. And I enjoyed being friends and everything, but sometimes allow God. I couldn't see until afterwards that really I wasn't valued to the level that I was valuing the individual. And what we have to understand that sometimes if there's anything in your life, in a relationship, that is preventing you from seeing God in the fullness that he wants you to see him, a shift is coming because he cares that much about you. And then you begin to take your eyes and focus more on you, on him and what he wants. It's not that it could be perfectly innocent, from your perspective, healthy and all of that. You pray together, you do things together and all of that. But what God's saying, I require more of you. And this thing right here, as pretty as it may look and kind and innocent and everything, I'm calling you out of that because I'm ready to shift you here, because I've got folk that are assigned to you that are going to value you to the level that you value that. It's going to blow your mind. And that's why it's so important to love people. Hear me well, and these counselors going to fix it if I mess this up. But that's what I got to say. Love them enough to leave them.
Yeah, sometimes and that's about boundaries and all that. But I'm skipping over one of the attributes to get to this last one, which is kindness, because it is about what you are talking about. So, kindness is a quality of being friendly, generous, and considering. To be kind is to make life easier for the other person and to serve them from the heart. It's the same word that Jesus uses when he says, my yoke is easy. That's the same Greek word as kind, and my burden is light. Kindness, like Jesus, gets into the harness of life's problems with the other person and does all they can to lift these burdens. Kindness takes many forms. In general, it's soft and gentle. Occasionally, however, kindness must take the form of a careful rebuke designed to bring about a good result. In fact, Proverbs 27:5-6 says that talks about the rebuke of a friend, how it displays love. The other thing about this, my yoke is easy. The imagery of getting into the harness with someone is like two oxen pulling a load. And you said it earlier, Beth. And as a farm girl, I know that you have to be equally yoked, because if one is stronger than the other, then the burden becomes unmanageable and can cause whatever is being carried to tumble to the ground. In this case, it's the friendship. Or for instance, if you're plowing a field, the roads can become uneven. So I have two questions here. And Beth, you've already answered in part one of them. But the first one is, in what way is the rebuke of a friend a profound display of love? And the second, and this is the one that you started to address, is how can being unequally yoked in friendship or business cause your love to wax cold? So the first question, in what way is the rebuke of a friend a profound display of love? The second question, how can being unequally yoked in friendship, like you described that, or business cause your love to wax cold? And that's what we will end with. And Beth, perhaps you can end it so you can take us out.
Okay. Okay.
Christine,
Gotcha.
Christine, if you'll address those good questions, then Beth can take us out.
Excellent.
You know, like a rebuke of a friend is likened to a kiss in the Bible. In Galatians 1:6-1, it says, "Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a sin, ye who are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted." Notice it's to brethren. We don't, it's to those who have, that have the same father, right? And the same family culture that we're supposed to have, right? Of self-sacrificial love for good for those of others, of living a life that we, that brings peace and wholeness. I mean, the reason God doesn't like sin or hates sin isn't because of a bunch of rules. It's because sin always breaks relationship, right? It's always taken from someone else for ourselves. It's building walls between us. It's building distrust, right? So that's why we don't want to sin, because that's no way for a family to work, is with deceit and lies and broken trust. And so, you know, it's if a brother or sister be in sin, ye who are spiritual, right? Those of you who are walking in alignment. And of course, we balance this with what, you know, speck in someone else's eye or the log in our own. And so we go to the council of people that know us and can say, okay, well, is my desire to correct somebody because I've got self-righteousness or unresolved trauma and I want to lash out at the world? Or is it because I really love them and I'm distressed over the consequences this is going to have in their relationships and in their life? So it's a profound display of love. I mean, in terms of, you know, I remember when one of my mentors rebuked me one time, and she did it just with tears streaming down her face because she didn't want to harm our relationship at all. But she saw some things in my life that she had a right. And I think this is where we often botch it, is you have to have a right and a relationship with someone
Yes.
to do this work.
Come on.
And how many times, you know, like I remember, like, you know, sometimes I used to be in campus ministry full time, and, you know, students would almost cringe when a staff member would say, hey, can we grab lunch together? Because so many times it was to point out a sin. And sometimes it was from a staff member who didn't have a relationship with him. And that just, isn't that horrible to go, you know, and so I say, I promise, if there's ever an issue that I would talk about, I'll lead with that. Like, hey, you know, there's an uncomfortable conversation. Where would you like to have it? Or, but we have to know what's going on in their life. We don't have the right to rattle a house without having been there to support it and structure it. We have to have the right and the relationship to rebuke. And I think a lot of times we've botched that historically in the church, you know, and I've seen some horrific examples of spiritual abuse.
Girl.
I think the goal was to help somebody stop sinning, but what they didn't do is they just slaughtered them, sometimes in front of congregations, which is not a spirit of meekness. It's not being mindful to our own sin. I mean, I think Jerry Bridges says, preach the gospel to yourself daily, right? We have to remember the reason we love is because we have been forgiven so much, just like that wonderful woman that poured the perfume on Jesus's feet, kissed him, wiped him with their hair, right? She loved much because she'd been forgiven much. And we lose touch if we don't remember how much we've been forgiven. because, all of us are in the same boat when it comes to needing a savior. So it is a tremendous act of love. And in terms of being unequally yoked in friendship or business, we are called to keep on allowing God to make us more like him. And we need those around us that are intimate, our inner circles, to have that same commitment. And it doesn't mean we grow the same ways, even in marriage, right? That's what keeps the marriage going, is you accept the fact that God might be at work, but you keep sharing the work God's doing, and you allow God to keep being at work. So we're continue like that triangle, right? We keep on getting closer to the Lord, even if it's going to be expressed differently. Midlife, right? We all end up being married to somebody else than we started out with, So that's that connection point along the way. But with friendships and things, sometimes we have friends that just decide to go, and you might choose to just kind of keep them in your life, but maybe you just kind of move them to one of those little circles that's not quite in that part of how much we're giving voice to our spiritual formation. Maybe it's, we still go to movies together and have a good time, but maybe it's, God's calling me to do some stuff, and you're kind of getting in the way and putting out the Spirit's fire, and we don't want that, right? So, yeah.
So Beth, why is rebuke of a friend a profound display of love? And
oh gosh, this is
how
so
is
good.
being
And
unequally yoked?
I wish we could even talk about this again next week, because there's so much to me uncovered that's still to be uncovered. But
Okay.
what what Christina is just sharing with us is Proverbs 27:5. And I want to read 6 as well. Open rebuke is better than love carefully concealed. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. And when we don't give that open rebuke with the parameters around what Christine said, making sure that the relationship is able to withstand what is to be shared, that you have solidified that relationship to this point. The opportunity is we're treating our friend as an enemy when we're not providing that, speaking the truth in love, seasoning our words with salt. And there were opportunities where I overlooked, in that same example that I gave earlier in that friendship, there were writings on the wall. It was obvious there was jealousy. Even when the references were made to my being Oprah and there being Gail. See, that was twisted right there, but I missed that and I overlooked it. And there was an elephant in the room. There were always one side, and I was always the doer, and that kind of, listen, I didn't know it, but looking back, maybe that was a way of puffing me up, and I was blinded. Maybe I enjoyed that. I don't know, but I was like, oh my God, what an ingest to not giving the feedback and say, hey, you know what, I hear you say this, but I see you do this. This just seems a little twisted here, but, and so it was like, oh my God, just find your air, because it's an air, it's not just one person, it's you, how have I contributed to allow this thing to turn out? And in the end, the jealousy was totally revealed. How can you walk with someone, I said, for 10 years? Well, it was obvious. I didn't call it out. I let it slide, And so the opportunity that I'm encouraging people in relationships today is a friend speaks truth to a friend. And I'm just talking about from right here. And we have to make sure that our love is pure. Hear what I'm saying? Capital P, capital U, capital R, and capital E. Pure love that exceeds from the Father, that we want the best. And you may say, well, you did a lot of whatever for us. No, the best is the truth. If we're not speaking the truth, if we're massaging things to make it fit and to make it feel better, if we're not walking fully in our giftedness that God has given us because it makes somebody uncomfortable, that is not from God. If we're luke watering, playing down what God has called us to do, because those that you're in your circle might oppose it or might not understand it, that's not a God. See, what we have to understand is God is calling us higher. What the natural would say, you just leave and you think you're better, all of that. No, because I love you, I have to follow where God is taking me. And in the end, the reason that relationship, it was the one thing they said, you had this huge ministry and I have this small. See, that was the key for me. All this time, you saw this. And me, even now, I tell people GCBN is a small organization, but our heart is huge. But you looked at me, and the opportunity is if someone's looking at you and measuring you, because Paul said it's not wise when we compare ourselves against ourselves. Sometimes we're in relationship, friendships with people, and all we're called to do is to be a vessel, allowing God to use us for a season, but it's not meant for BFL. It's not meant for long term. And we keep patching it up and overlooking, and we're doing that individual an unjust, and we're doing ourselves one. But ultimately, we're disobedient to God.
And which
Thank you,
actually
guys.
speaks to that with my last comment as you close us out. How can being unequally yoked, which is if you're in a relationship you're supposed to have left, is being unequally yoked, can cause your love to wax cold. You become lukewarm because you are staying at a place. Your love is waxing cold because you're in a place you're not supposed to be. So we're talking about character next week, and we'll continue some of this as well.
That would be wonderful. Pamela, this is awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Christine. And for those that were over on the Facebook side of the house, Toby made some comments, Janet Harrington. Thank you guys. Join us on Zoom if you can. Sometimes it's hard to get over there to get the comments, but we appreciate it. If you're watching the replay, please let us know that. But I want to invite you to share this out to your platform so other people can see this and understand and appreciate what God is calling us to, a stronger, more powerful love walk, because love will take you places that you never experienced if you allow the love of God to walk the path of love that He's called you to. Thank you guys for joining us today. Please visit our website. Pamela gave a plug there earlier on. I don't have to repeat that. I just want to welcome you to the GCBN family as a member or a sponsor. While you're out there, get an opportunity to join us for upcoming opportunities that we have. Take Charge Tuesday. I'm excited. Monifa Groover is going to join us on next week, and Pamela's already told you what we're going to speak about on Wellness Wednesday platform. Thank you guys for joining us. This has been wonderful. Keep Jessica Banner in your prayers, so she'll be back with us next week. And listen, Christine, Pamela, love you dearly. All right, and kudos to Bianca for just keeping us as our producer every week. It's just wonderful having her here. Take care. God bless you guys. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye now.